"Can I have a piece of your lunch?" Single father shared his sandwich with a girl, not knowing she was the daughter of a billionaire woman. "Before we start, I love seeing this community grow. Feel free to introduce yourself below." Robert Chen clutched his worn leather briefcase as autumn wind whipped through downtown Seattle, leaves swirling around his scuffed dress shoes. His stomach growled loudly. He'd skipped breakfast again to afford Sarah's new school backpack. The single father of 8-year-old Emma hurried toward the small park where he ate lunch every Tuesday, hoping the half sandwich tucked in his brown paper bag would quiet the gnawing hunger that had become his constant companion. At 34, Robert had learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. 3 years since his wife Linda left him for her wealthy boss, abandoning both him and Emma for a life of luxury in California, he'd been raising his daughter alone on his modest accounting salary at Henderson & Associates. Designer clothes had given way to thrift store finds, fancy restaurants to home-cooked meals scraped together from whatever was on sale, but Emma's bright smile and infectious laughter made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. He settled onto his usual bench beneath the old oak tree, unwrapping the peanut butter and jelly sandwich he'd made with the last slice of bread from their nearly empty kitchen. As he took his first careful bite, savoring the simple flavors, he noticed her, a small girl with tangled blonde hair and dirty, expensive-looking clothes sitting on the grass nearby, watching him with the hollow, desperate eyes of someone who understood true hunger. She couldn't be older than Emma, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Her once beautiful dress was torn and stained, contrasting sharply with her obviously expensive patent leather shoes and delicate gold bracelet. Fresh tear stains marked her pale, dirt-smudged cheeks, and she hugged her knees tightly against her chest as if trying to make herself invisible to the world. "Excuse me, mister," the girl whispered, approaching his bench with hesitant, careful steps. "Could you maybe give me just a tiny piece of your lunch? I promise I'm not being greedy or anything." Robert's heart clenched painfully in his chest. The politeness in her request, the way she apologized for being hungry, told him everything he needed to know about this child's desperate situation. Without hesitation, he tore his precious sandwich directly in half, the larger portion going to her small, trembling hands. "Of course, sweetheart," Robert said gently, his voice warm with the same tone he used when Emma was scared. "What's your name, honey?" "Sarah," she replied, accepting the food with a gratitude so profound it nearly brought tears to his eyes. "I haven't eaten anything since yesterday morning, maybe the morning before that. I lose track of time sometimes." Yesterday morning, Robert's parental instincts, honed by 3 years of single fatherhood, screamed emergency alarms. This wasn't just a hungry child. This was a little girl in serious trouble, possibly danger. "Where are your parents, Sarah?" he asked carefully, trying to keep the worry out of his voice. The girl's green eyes, so bright and intelligent despite her obvious distress, filled with fresh tears that she tried desperately to wipe away with the back of her hand. "My mommy. She's always working in her big office downtown. She has very important meetings with very important people. She doesn't even know I'm gone, and I don't think she'd care if she did know." Robert studied Sarah's face more carefully, the expensive dental work visible when she spoke, the quality of her torn designer dress, the obvious signs of neglect mixed with indicators of extreme wealth. Something about this situation wasn't adding up in his mind, but right now, a hungry, frightened child needed immediate help and comfort. "Tell you what, Sarah," Robert said, pulling out his thermos of coffee. "You can share this too. It's got extra milk and sugar just the way my daughter Emma likes it. It might help warm you up a bit." As Sarah ate with the desperate hunger of someone who truly hadn't eaten in days, Robert's mind raced through possibilities. Should he call the police immediately? Child Protective Services? But something about her desperate gratitude, her obvious fear of being discovered, made him pause and reconsider his options. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Sarah asked between careful bites, as if the sandwich was the most precious thing she'd ever received. "Most grown-ups just walk past me like I'm invisible." "Because everyone deserves kindness, especially brave little girls who are courageous enough to ask for help when they need it," Robert replied simply, remembering his own childhood bouncing between foster homes. "And because I have a daughter just about your age, and I'd hope someone would help her if she was scared and alone." Sarah's eyes widened as if basic human kindness was completely foreign to her privileged world. She finished eating slowly, savoring every bite, then stood to leave with obvious reluctance. But Robert gently caught her arm with the lightest touch. "Sarah, wait just a second. Will you be here tomorrow? Same time?" She nodded silently, hope flickering in her tired eyes for the first time, before disappearing into the crowd of downtown pedestrians, leaving Robert sitting alone with 1,000 urgent questions and the strangest, strongest feeling that this chance encounter would change absolutely everything about his ordinary life. 23 blocks away in the heart of Seattle's financial district, Victoria Sterling paced frantically across her corner office on the 42nd floor of Sterling Tower, her designer heels clicking an anxious rhythm against the imported Italian marble floors. As founder and CEO of Sterling Industries, the Pacific Northwest's largest and most influential real estate development empire worth over $2.8 billion, she commanded absolute respect from corporate boardrooms to city council chambers. But right now, staring out at the city skyline she had helped shape, she felt completely powerless and terrified. "Any word at all from the security team?" Victoria asked her longtime assistant Margaret, for what felt like the 100th time in the past hour, her usually controlled voice cracking with barely contained panic. "Nothing concrete yet, Miss Sterling. They're systematically checking all the usual places. The shopping centers, movie theaters, even the homeless shelters downtown. The private investigators have street teams canvassing Pioneer Square and the waterfront areas." Victoria's perfectly manicured hands trembled as she gazed out at the sprawling metropolis below. 8-year-old Sarah had been missing for over 36 hours now, the longest she had ever disappeared during one of these increasingly frequent episodes. These terrifying vanishing acts had started shortly after the bitter, highly publicized divorce from Richard 3 years ago, but they were definitely getting worse, more frequent, and lasting longer each time. "She's just a little girl," Victoria whispered, pressing her palm against the cold window glass. "She can't have gone far. She doesn't even know how to use public transportation or navigate the city streets alone." The cruel irony of the situation wasn't lost on her sharp business mind. Victoria Sterling could purchase anything money could buy, control virtually any situation through sheer force of wealth and influence, manipulate city planning decisions that affected millions of people, except she couldn't control her own daughter's overwhelming pain and desperate need for attention. Since the messy, vindictive divorce from Richard, a divorce that had played out across tabloid headlines for months, Sarah had become increasingly withdrawn, acting out in ways that absolutely terrified Victoria. The tantrums, the silent treatments, the deliberate defiance, and now these disappearances that left Victoria's heart shattered with worry. "The private investigator Morrison is holding on line 3, Margaret announced softly, recognizing the urgency in her boss's demeanor. Victoria grabbed the phone with desperate hope. "Please tell me you found her, James. Please tell me she's safe." "Not yet, Victoria, but we do have some promising leads to follow." Street cameras captured footage showing her near Pioneer Square around noon yesterday. She appeared to be alone, possibly hungry, definitely looking lost and confused. Hungry. The single word hit Victoria like a physical blow to her chest. While she had been trapped in back-to-back merger meetings, negotiating a $75 million acquisition deal, her own precious daughter had been wandering the dangerous streets of downtown Seattle, scared, alone, and apparently going without food. "I want you to double the search team immediately," Victoria ordered, her voice regaining some of its usual commanding authority. "Triple it if necessary. I don't care what it costs. Hire every private investigator in the city if you have to." After hanging up, Victoria sank into her massive leather executive chair, completely overwhelmed by guilt and self-recrimination. Her own childhood had been spent desperately longing for her parents' attention and affection, while they relentlessly built their own business empire, traveling constantly and leaving her with a succession of nannies and housekeepers. She had sworn with every fiber of her being that she would be different, that she would be the mother she had always wished for. Margaret knocked gently on the office door. "The Peterson merger documents are ready and need your signature for tomorrow's board meeting." "Not now," Victoria snapped reflexively, then immediately softened her voice with genuine regret. "I'm sorry, Margaret. Please cancel everything on my schedule for the rest of the week. I need to focus entirely on finding Sarah before something terrible happens to her. She pulled out her personal phone, scrolling through dozens of photos of Sarah. Birthday parties where Sarah sat alone while Victoria worked late. School events Victoria had missed for important client meetings. Family dinners where Sarah sat silent and sad while Victoria checked emails on her phone. Victoria closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember Sarah's heartbreaking words from their last argument just days before she disappeared. You love your stupid buildings and your dumb meetings more than you love me, Mommy. I wish Daddy had taken me with him to California. The painful, unavoidable truth was that Victoria simply didn't know how to be the kind of mother Sarah desperately needed. She knew how to negotiate complex deals, how to win impossible battles, how to build a financial empire from nothing, but she had never learned the simple, essential art of just being emotionally present for her daughter. Her phone rang sharply, interrupting her tortured thoughts. Security again. We found something important, Ms. Sterling. A witness reported seeing a man sharing his lunch with a young girl matching Sarah's description in Occidental Park. We're investigating this person thoroughly right now. Robert arrived at Occidental Park 15 minutes early the next day, carrying 2 carefully packed brown bags and silently hoping against hope that Sarah would return safely. Yesterday's unexpected encounter had haunted his thoughts all night, keeping him awake with worry and questions about the mysterious little girl who had stumbled into his ordinary life. Emma had immediately noticed his distraction during their simple dinner of mac and cheese and canned green beans. Daddy, you seem really sad tonight, she had said with the sharp intuition that 8-year-olds possess. Did something bad happen at work today? Just thinking about someone who might need our help, sweetheart, Robert had replied, not wanting to worry her with adult problems. Can we help them? You always tell me that helping people is the most important thing we can do. Now scanning the park benches and hoping to spot Sarah's small figure, Robert wondered if he had made the right decision yesterday. Maybe he should have immediately called the authorities, contacted Child Protective Services, or at least tried harder to get more information about her family situation. But something about Sarah's genuine fear, her desperate hunger, and her obvious terror of being discovered reminded him powerfully of his own childhood, bouncing between foster homes after his parents died in a car accident when he was 7, always hungry, always afraid, always wondering if anyone actually cared about him. You came back, a small wondering voice said behind him, filled with amazement. Robert turned around to find Sarah approaching cautiously, looking even more disheveled than she had yesterday. Her expensive dress was torn in new places, and streaks of dirt marked her pale face, but her eyes held a spark of hope that hadn't been there before. Of course I came back, Robert said gently, his heart breaking at her surprise. I promised I would be here, and I always keep my promises. I brought lunch for both of us today. Sarah's green eyes widened in complete disbelief. Both of us? You mean you brought food just for me too? Ham and cheese sandwiches, apple slices, chocolate chip cookies, and chocolate milk, Robert announced proudly, patting the bench beside him in invitation. My daughter Emma helped me pack everything this morning. She's very good at making sure people have enough to eat. As they shared their meal together, Robert studied Sarah more carefully, looking for clues about her background and situation. Despite her current disheveled condition, absolutely everything about her spoke of privilege and wealth. Her perfect posture, her articulate speech patterns, the way she carefully folded her napkin, her obvious familiarity with expensive things. This definitely wasn't a homeless child or a runaway from a poor family. This was clearly someone's beloved, well-educated daughter who had somehow ended up lost and alone on the streets. Sarah, can you tell me your last name? Robert asked as gently as possible, not wanting to frighten her. She hesitated for several long seconds, clearly debating whether to trust him. Sterling, she finally whispered. The name hit Robert like a lightning bolt of recognition. Sterling Industries, the massive corporation that owned at least half of downtown Seattle's most impressive buildings. Victoria Sterling, the famous billionaire CEO whose photograph graced business magazines and newspaper financial sections. Could this frightened, neglected little girl possibly be related to one of the most powerful women in the entire Pacific Northwest? Your mother, Robert said very carefully, trying to keep his voice calm. What's her name? Victoria. Sarah whispered, confirming his growing suspicion. But she's always busy with really important meetings and big business deals. She doesn't have any time left for me anymore, especially since Daddy moved to California. Robert's mind reeled with the implications. He was sitting here sharing his simple lunch with the daughter of Victoria Sterling, one of the wealthiest, most influential people in the region, but looking at Sarah's hollow, sad eyes and her obvious emotional neglect, he saw only a lonely child who desperately needed someone to care about her well-being. "Why don't you go home, Sarah? I'm sure your mother must be worried sick about you right now." Sarah's laugh was bitter and cynical, far too mature and knowing for her 8 years. "She probably hasn't even noticed that I'm gone yet. She might not notice for days. She loves her precious buildings and her important clients way more than she could ever love me." Victoria's phone buzzed insistently at exactly 3:17 a.m., jolting her from the restless, nightmare-filled sleep that had become her reality. Private Investigator James Morrison's name flashed urgently on the screen, and she answered before the first ring had completely ended. "Please tell me you found her," Victoria demanded immediately, her voice hoarse from crying and shouting orders to search teams. "We located her general whereabouts." Morrison's voice was cautious and professional. "But Ms. Sterling, I need to warn you that this situation is quite unusual and not what you might be expecting." "I don't care how unusual it is, just tell me where my daughter is right now," Victoria demanded, already reaching for her clothes with trembling hands. "She's been spending significant time in Occidental Park with a man named Robert Chen. He's 34 years old, divorced, single father to an 8-year-old daughter named Emma. He works as an accountant at Henderson & Associates. We've run a complete background check. No criminal record, no history of violence, exemplary credit rating despite modest income." Victoria's blood ran ice cold with terror. "A complete stranger? What is he doing with my daughter? Why does he have access to Sarah?" "According to multiple witnesses we've interviewed, he's been sharing his daily lunch with her for the past 2 days. All reports describe his behavior as gentle, protective, almost fatherly in nature. But Ms. Sterling, I'm calling the police immediately," Victoria interrupted, panic rising like bile in her throat. "This sounds like kidnapping or worse." "Ma'am, please wait and listen to me carefully. I really don't think this situation is what you're imagining. This man, Robert Chen, seems genuinely concerned about Sarah's welfare and safety. Multiple witnesses described him as kind and caring, treating her with obvious affection." Victoria paced frantically around her massive penthouse bedroom, designer gowns hanging in the walk-in closet like silent witnesses to her complete breakdown as a mother. "I don't care how kind he seems to observers. He's a stranger who has somehow gained access to my vulnerable child. Ms. Sterling, with all due respect, Sarah appears to be actively seeking him out. She's choosing to go to that park every day. According to our sources, she specifically told him that her mother is always too busy with work to notice her or spend any time with her." The words hit Victoria harder than any hostile corporate takeover or vicious business attack she had ever endured. She sank onto her king-sized bed, the phone trembling violently in her manicured hand. "What exactly are you saying to me?" "I'm saying that your daughter is desperately crying out for attention and genuine affection, and she found exactly what she needed in a complete stranger. This Robert Chen, he's been feeding her, listening to her problems, giving her the focused time and emotional support she apparently isn't receiving at home." Victoria's reflection stared back accusingly from her bedroom mirror. A successful, powerful woman in a silk nightgown worth more than most people's monthly salaries, surrounded by luxury and wealth beyond imagination, yet completely and utterly alone in her failure as a mother. When was the last time she had really talked to Sarah? Not about school schedules or piano lessons or homework assignments, but actually listened carefully to her daughter's thoughts, dreams, fears, and feelings. "I want complete surveillance on both of them immediately," Victoria commanded, her business instincts taking over. "Full detail 24-hour coverage. I need to know absolutely everything about this Robert Chen and his relationship with my daughter." "Already in place and operational. Mrs. Sterling, if I may respectfully suggest something, maybe this is actually an opportunity for you to understand what Sarah really needs from you as her mother." After hanging up, Victoria stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the glittering city lights of the empire she had built through sheer determination and ruthless ambition. Somewhere out there in those streets, her precious daughter was seeking emotional comfort from a complete stranger, because her own mother had failed her so completely. Emma, what would you do if you met a little girl who seemed really, really sad all the time? Robert asked his daughter over their breakfast of oatmeal and orange juice the following morning. Emma looked up from stirring honey into her bowl, her dark eyes serious and thoughtful. I would try really hard to be her friend, Daddy. Sad kids need friends more than anything else in the whole world. That's absolutely right, sweetheart. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is simply share what we have with someone who needs it. As Robert walked to his office through the crisp Seattle morning, Emma's wise words echoed repeatedly in his mind. For 4 days now he had been meeting Sarah in the park during his lunch hour, and each encounter revealed more heartbreaking details about her emotional pain and neglect. Yesterday, she had told him about her parents' bitter divorce, how she secretly blamed herself for all their fighting and arguing. Maybe if I had been prettier, Sarah had whispered, her 8-year-old voice filled with devastating self-doubt, or smarter in school, or better at playing piano, maybe Daddy wouldn't have left us and moved so far away. Robert's heart had completely shattered for this little girl who carried such enormous, inappropriate guilt on her small shoulders. His own divorce from Linda had been painful and messy, but he had made absolutely certain that Emma understood it wasn't her fault in any way. At lunchtime, Robert found Sarah waiting anxiously by their usual bench, but something seemed different about her today. She appeared more nervous than usual, constantly looking over her shoulder and scanning the park as if expecting someone to appear. Are you okay today, sweetheart? Robert asked with concern, settling beside her with their carefully packed lunch. I think someone might be watching us, Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with worry. I noticed the same black car parked across the street yesterday, and again today. It makes me feel scared. Robert's protective instincts immediately flared to high alert. He had been wondering when Victoria Sterling might discover her daughter's daily whereabouts and routine. A woman with her resources and connections wouldn't take long to track down a missing child. Sarah, maybe it's finally time we called your mother. She must be absolutely terrified with worry about you. No, please. Sarah's reaction was immediate and fierce, her small hands grabbing his arm. Please don't make me go back there yet. She'll just send me to my room while she works on her laptop and makes important phone calls. At least here, someone actually talks to me and listens to what I have to say. The desperate longing in her voice made Robert's decision for him. Okay, but Sarah, I need you to promise me something very important. If you ever feel unsafe anywhere, or if you need help with anything at all, you call me immediately. He carefully wrote his phone number on a clean napkin. Can you memorize this number? Sarah nodded seriously, studying the digits with intense concentration until she had them committed to memory. As they shared their sandwiches and apple slices, Robert couldn't help but notice a black luxury sedan parked strategically across the street, the same vehicle Sarah had mentioned yesterday. Professional surveillance, discreet but obvious to someone who knew what to look for. Sarah, Robert said carefully, choosing his words with great thought. What if your mother just doesn't know how to show you that she cares? Sometimes grown-ups get scared too, you know. Scared of what? Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. Scared of not being good enough parents. Scared of making mistakes that hurt their children. Scared of losing the people they love most in the world. Sarah considered this possibility, her intelligent 8-year-old mind working through complex adult emotions that should have been far beyond her years. Do you really think she loves me? Even though she's never around anymore? I think any mother in the world would be incredibly lucky to have a daughter as special as you, Robert said with complete honesty. Sometimes people just need help learning how to show their love in better ways. Unknown to them both, Victoria Sterling sat in that black sedan just 50 yards away, watching through high-powered binoculars as a complete stranger provided her daughter with the emotional support and genuine attention she had been too busy and self-absorbed to give. Victoria's hand shook uncontrollably as she watched Robert gently wipe chocolate milk from Sarah's chin with a paper napkin. Exactly the same tender gesture she used to make when Sarah was smaller and needed her mother's care. The simple act of kindness unleashed a devastating flood of precious memories. Bedtime stories read in funny voices, scraped knee kisses that magically made pain disappear, the sweet, trusting weight of Sarah sleeping peacefully in her arms during afternoon naps. When had she stopped being that kind of mother? When had work become more important than her daughter's emotional needs? "Ma'am, should we intervene now?" Her security chief Marcus spoke quietly from the driver's seat, his hand resting on the door handle. "Not yet," Victoria whispered, unable to look away from the heartwarming scene unfolding before her. Sarah was animated and joyful, gesturing excitedly as she told Robert something that made him throw back his head and laugh with genuine delight. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she had made her daughter smile with such pure happiness and contentment. Through her earpiece, Victoria listened to their conversation, courtesy of the sophisticated long-range microphone Marcus had carefully positioned nearby. "My daddy used to read me stories about princesses before he moved away," Sarah was saying thoughtfully. "But those princesses were always just sitting around waiting for someone else to come save them from their problems. I think princesses should be brave enough to save themselves, don't you?" "Absolutely," Robert replied with complete seriousness, treating her opinion with the respect she craved. "The very best princesses are the ones who are brave and kind and use their power to help other people who need it. That's exactly what I want to be when I grow up. A princess who saves people instead of waiting around to be rescued." Victoria's eyes filled with hot tears that threatened to ruin her carefully applied makeup. How had she missed this? Her daughter's dreams, her thoughtful opinions about fairy tales and courage and helping others. She had been so intensely focused on building a financial empire for Sarah to eventually inherit, that she had completely forgotten to actually know and understand the remarkable child she was building it for. "Sir, we have movement," Marcus announced urgently. Victoria looked up to see Robert standing and checking his watch. The lunch hour was ending, as it did every day. As always, Sarah clung desperately to these final precious moments, clearly reluctant to return to her lonely, isolated world. "Same time tomorrow?" Sarah asked with hopeful anticipation. "I'll be right here," Robert promised without hesitation, then paused thoughtfully. "Sarah, I want you to know something important. You're not alone in this world, okay? Even when it feels like nobody cares, there are people who think you're absolutely wonderful. People like you. People like me," Robert confirmed, his voice thick with genuine emotion and affection. Victoria watched her daughter walk away with her shoulders straight and her head held high, radiating new confidence and self-worth. For 4 days, this complete stranger had given Sarah something she desperately needed, the unshakable feeling that she truly mattered to someone. As Robert packed up their lunch trash and prepared to return to work, Victoria made an impulsive decision that would change everything. She climbed out of the luxury sedan, her expensive Louboutin heels clicking against the pavement as she approached him with her heart pounding. "Mr. Chen," she called softly, her voice barely steady. Robert spun around immediately, his face cycling rapidly through surprise, recognition, and finally protective wariness as he realized who was speaking to him. Ms. Sterling. They stood just 3 feet apart, the billionaire CEO in her perfectly tailored $1,000 suit and the modest single father in his department store clothes. Two parents whose lives had become unexpectedly and permanently intertwined through love for the same precious little girl. "We need to talk," Victoria said, surprised by how vulnerable her voice sounded. Robert nodded slowly, his protective instincts clearly engaged. "Yes, we absolutely do." Neither of them realized that this conversation would change not just their own lives forever, but the entire trajectory of their families' futures. Sarah, watching breathlessly from behind a large oak tree, held her breath as the two most important adults in her world finally came face to face for the very first time. The real story was just beginning to unfold. "Before you say anything," Robert began, his voice steady but protective, "I want you to know that Sarah is safe. She's been safe every moment she's been with me. I would never hurt a child." Victoria's carefully constructed composure crumbled instantly. Tears she'd been holding back for days streamed down her face, smearing her expensive makeup. "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've been watching you both. I've seen how gentle you are with her, how you listen to her, how you make her laugh." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither expected to cross. Robert's defensive posture softened slightly as he witnessed the raw pain of a mother in crisis. "She thinks you don't love her," Robert said quietly. "She believes your work is more important than she is." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. "That's not true. Everything I do is for her. The company, the money, all of it. It's her inheritance, her future security." "But what about her present?" Robert asked gently. "What about her childhood? Her need to feel valued and heard?" Victoria sank onto the park bench where her daughter had found comfort with a stranger. "I don't know how to be the mother she needs. My parents were always working, always traveling. I swore I'd be different, but look at me. I'm exactly like them." Robert studied this powerful woman who controlled billions but couldn't control her daughter's pain. "Sarah told me about the divorce. She blames herself for your marriage falling apart." "What?" Victoria's head snapped up. "That's impossible. Richard and I fought about his gambling, his affairs, his complete irresponsibility with money. Sarah had nothing to do with our problems." "Did you tell her that? Did you explain that sometimes adults make mistakes that have nothing to do with their children?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. In her rush to protect Sarah from the ugly details of the divorce, she'd left her daughter to fill in the blanks with her own devastating conclusions. "I can fix this," Victoria said, her business instincts kicking in. "I'll hire the best child psychologists, family therapists. Money can solve this problem." "Can it?" Robert challenged softly. "Sarah doesn't need expensive therapy right now. She needs her mother to show up. Really show up. Not with checkbook solutions, but with time and attention and genuine interest in who she is." Victoria looked at this modest man, who'd given her daughter something priceless, the feeling of being seen and valued. "Why did you help her?" "You didn't know who she was." "Because she was hungry and scared, and I have a daughter too." "Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is share what little we have with someone who needs it more." The simplicity of his answer made Victoria realize how complicated she'd made everything. While she'd been building empires, this man had been building something far more valuable: human connections. "Will you help me?" Victoria asked, swallowing her pride completely. "Will you help me learn how to be the mother Sarah deserves?" Robert considered her request carefully. "That depends. Are you willing to put Sarah first? Really first? Not just say it, but actually do it." Victoria nodded, knowing that this conversation was changing the entire trajectory of her relationship with her daughter, forever. 3 days later, Victoria Sterling did something unprecedented in her business career. She cleared her entire calendar for 2 weeks. No meetings, no calls, no emails marked urgent. Margaret had nearly fainted when Victoria announced her decision. "But the Morrison deal closes tomorrow," Margaret had protested. "Tom Morrison can wait," Victoria replied, shocking her assistant into silence. "My daughter can't." Now Victoria sat nervously in Occidental Park at 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Sarah's usual lunchtime with Robert. She'd traded her power suit for jeans and a simple sweater, feeling more vulnerable than she had in years. Robert arrived precisely on time, carrying his usual brown bags. His face showed surprise at seeing Victoria, but also something that looked like approval. "She doesn't know I'm here," Victoria said quickly. "I wanted to observe first, to understand what she needs from our interactions." "Smart approach," Robert nodded, settling on a nearby bench. "Just remember, Sarah's incredibly perceptive. If you're not genuine, she'll know immediately." At exactly noon, Sarah appeared, her face lighting up when she saw Robert, but her expression changed to confusion, then wariness, when she spotted her mother. "Mommy?" Sarah's voice was small, uncertain. "What are you doing here?" Victoria's heart clenched at the fear in her daughter's voice. Fear that she was in trouble, that this safe space would be taken away. "I came to apologize," Victoria said simply. Sarah approached cautiously, like a wild animal unsure if it was walking into a trap. "Apologize for what?" "For being too busy to see how much you were hurting. For making you feel like you weren't important to me. For failing you as a mother." The honesty in Victoria's voice seemed to surprise Sarah. She glanced between her mother and Robert, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. Robert told me about your conversations, Victoria continued, about how you blame yourself for Daddy leaving. Sarah, sweetheart, that was never your fault. Not for one single second. But you and Daddy fought about me all the time, Sarah said, her young voice heavy with guilt. No, baby, we didn't. We fought about grown-up problems, about Daddy's gambling and the money he lost, about promises he broke. You were the only good thing in our marriage. You were never the problem. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for 3 years. Really? Really, Victoria confirmed, opening her arms. For the first time in months, Sarah ran to her mother, allowing herself to be held. Robert watched this reunion with quiet satisfaction, knowing he'd played a small part in healing a broken family. But as Victoria held her daughter, he also felt a strange pang of loss. Their lunch meetings had become the highlight of his days, too. Mr. Robert, Sarah said, pulling away from her mother but staying close. Will you still have lunch with me sometimes? I don't want to stop being your friend. Robert looked at Victoria, who nodded gratefully. I'd be honored to continue being your friend, Sarah, and maybe your mom would like to join us sometimes. Victoria smiled through her tears. I'd like that very much. I think I have a lot to learn about being a better friend to both of you. 2 weeks later, an extraordinary sight appeared in Seattle's business district. Victoria Sterling walking hand in hand with her daughter toward the park, both of them carrying lunch bags and laughing at something Sarah had said. The transformation hadn't been easy. Victoria's first attempts at normal mothering had been disasters. Overscheduled fun activities that felt more like business presentations than bonding time. But slowly, with Robert's patient guidance and Sarah's cautious trust, they'd begun building something real. Tell Robert about your art project, Victoria encouraged as they approached their usual meeting spot. Sarah's face lit up. I'm painting a picture of all the people who make me feel safe. There's you and Emma and Robert, and Mrs. Patterson from school who always listens when kids have problems. Robert smiled as he unpacked their expanded lunch. Emma had insisted on contributing homemade cookies for everyone. I'd love to see it when you're finished. Maybe you could come to our house for dinner sometime, Sarah suggested boldly. Mommy's learning to cook real food instead of just ordering from restaurants. Victoria laughed, no longer embarrassed by her domestic shortcomings. I made pancakes yesterday that were only slightly burned. We're making progress. As they ate together, Victoria marveled at how natural this felt. For years, she'd believed that love meant providing material security. Now she understood that sometimes love was as simple as sitting on a park bench, sharing sandwiches, and really listening when someone spoke. Sarah, tell Robert about the changes we're making at home, Victoria prompted gently. Mommy moved her office to the house so she can work while I do homework. And we have dinner together every night now with no phones allowed at the table. And Saturday mornings are just for us. No work at all. Robert raised his eyebrows, impressed. Those sound like big changes, Victoria. The company survived, Victoria said with mock surprise. Apparently the world doesn't end when I'm not available 24/7. Who knew? But beneath the humor, Robert could see the genuine transformation in Victoria. The sharp edges had softened. Her smiles reached her eyes now. She touched Sarah frequently. Small gestures of affection that spoke of a mother learning to show love in ways her daughter could understand. There's something else, Victoria said, her voice becoming more serious. Sarah and I have been talking, and we have a proposition for you, Robert. Sarah bounced excitedly. Tell him, Mommy. Sterling Industries has an opening in our financial department. Senior level, significant salary increase, full benefits. The position would involve some travel, but nothing like my schedule used to be. Robert blinked in surprise. Victoria, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't accept charity. It's not charity, Victoria said firmly. It's recognition. You're brilliant with numbers, you're honest, and you have something my company desperately needs. You understand what really matters. Besides, she added with a smile, Sarah and Emma are already planning to be best friends. This just makes the logistics easier. Sarah grabbed Robert's hand. Please say yes. Emma could come to my school, and we could all be like a real family. The word family hung in the air, loaded with possibilities none of them had expected when this journey began with a shared sandwich. 6 months later, the Sterling Industries annual charity gala was unlike any the company had ever hosted. Instead of the usual stuffy affair with rubber chicken and speeches nobody remembered, Victoria had transformed it into a genuine celebration of community service. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria addressed the crowd from the podium, Sarah standing proudly beside her, "this year we're doing something different. Instead of talking about helping people, we're going to actually help them." The audience murmured with interest as Victoria gestured to tables set up around the ballroom. Each station represents a local charity that Sterling Industries will be supporting this year. But more than that, our employees will be volunteering their time, not just their money. Robert watched from his table, still amazed by how much his life had changed. The job at Sterling Industries had been everything Victoria promised. Challenging work with people who respected his abilities, financial security he'd never imagined, and the flexibility to be present for Emma's childhood. But the professional benefits paled in comparison to the personal transformation he'd witnessed in both Victoria and Sarah. The brittle, desperate woman from the park had evolved into someone who laughed easily, who put her daughter's needs first, who'd learned to find joy in simple moments. "Daddy, look!" Emma whispered excitedly, pointing to the stage. "Sarah's going to talk too." Indeed, Sarah had stepped forward to the microphone, looking confident and poised despite being only 8 years old. "Hi, everyone," Sarah began, her clear voice carrying across the ballroom. "6 months ago, I was really sad and angry. I thought nobody loved me, especially my mom. I ran away and ended up hungry and scared in a park downtown." The audience listened with rapt attention as Sarah told her story, the loneliness, the fear, and the kindness of a stranger who shared his lunch. "Mr. Robert didn't know I was rich," Sarah continued. "He didn't know my mom owned a big company. He just saw a hungry kid and decided to help. That taught me something important. The best people are the ones who are kind when nobody's watching, who help others even when they can't get anything back." Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she watched her daughter speak with wisdom far beyond her years. So tonight, while you're deciding how to help people, remember that sometimes the most important help is just paying attention, just caring about someone who feels invisible, because everybody deserves to feel like they matter. The ballroom erupted in applause, but Robert noticed something else. The way Victoria looked at Sarah with pure pride and love, the way Sarah instinctively reached for her mother's hand, the way both of them had healed from wounds that had seemed impossibly deep just months ago. After the speeches, Victoria found Robert at the dessert table. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For saving my daughter, for saving me, for showing us both what really matters." Robert smiled, thinking of that first day in the park when he'd shared half a sandwich with a hungry child. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. "Speaking of changes," Victoria said with a mysterious smile, "Sarah has something she wants to ask you and Emma." The question came on a sunny Saturday morning 3 weeks later, as the four of them walked through Pike Place Market together, a routine that had become precious to all of them. "Robert," Sarah said with the seriousness only 8-year-olds could muster, "do you think you and Emma would like to be our real family?" Robert stopped walking, his heart skipping as he understood what Sarah was asking. Emma, who'd been chattering excitedly about the flower vendors, suddenly went quiet. Victoria stepped forward, her cheeks flushed with nervousness. "What Sarah's trying to say is, Robert, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Watching you with Sarah, seeing how you've helped heal our family, getting to know the incredible man you are. Mommy's trying to ask if you want to marry us," Sarah interrupted with 8-year-old impatience. Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? We could all live together. Sarah could really be my sister." Robert looked at Victoria, this powerful woman who commanded boardrooms but was trembling as she waited for his answer. Then he looked at Sarah, the frightened child who'd become confident and joyful. Finally, he looked at Emma, his daughter who'd embraced Sarah like the sister she'd always wanted. "Victoria," Robert said softly, "6 months ago you were a stranger, but watching you transform, seeing you put Sarah first, learning to know your heart, I've fallen in love with the woman you've become." Victoria's tears flowed freely as Robert continued. "Sarah, Emma, you girls have already chosen each other as sisters. The question is, Are you sure you want a dad who's still learning how to make pancakes without burning them? Yes, both girls shouted simultaneously, drawing amused looks from other market-goers. Victoria stepped into Robert's arms, and for a moment, the busy market faded away. I love you, she whispered. I love your kindness, your wisdom, your ability to see what really matters. I love the father you are to Emma and the father you've become to Sarah. I love you too, Robert replied. I love your strength, your determination to change, your fierce love for Sarah. I love watching you discover the joy of being present. This is the best day ever, Emma declared, hugging Sarah tightly. Does this mean we get to plan a wedding? Sarah asked excitedly. Victoria laughed through her tears. It means we get to plan a life together, all four of us. As they stood there in the heart of Seattle, surrounded by the bustling energy of the market, Robert thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with hunger, Sarah's physical hunger, her emotional hunger for attention and love, Victoria's hunger to be a better mother, his own hunger for a family that felt complete. Now, looking at the faces of the three people who had become his world, Robert understood that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest acts of kindness. 1 year later, the wedding of Victoria Sterling and Robert Chen was featured on the society pages of every major newspaper in the Pacific Northwest, but not for the reason such weddings usually made headlines. Instead of an elaborate ceremony at the city's most exclusive venue, they'd chosen to marry in Occidental Park, at the very bench where their story began. Instead of hundreds of business associates and social connections, they'd invited only family, close friends, and representatives from the 5 charities that had become the focus of the Sterling Foundation's work. Dearly beloved, the officiant began, we gather today not just to witness the union of Victoria and Robert, but to celebrate the power of love to transform lives and heal broken hearts. Sarah and Emma stood as joint maids of honor, wearing matching dresses they'd picked out together, their bond as sisters now unshakable. Margaret served as Victoria's best friend and witness, still amazed by her boss's transformation from workaholic to devoted mother and partner. Victoria, the officiant continued, do you take Robert to be your husband, knowing that he first won your heart by showing kindness to your daughter when she needed it most? I do, Victoria said, her voice strong and clear. I take him as my partner in building not just a marriage, but a family founded on love, presence, and the understanding that our greatest wealth is the time we spend with each other. Robert, do you take Victoria to be your wife, knowing that your love helped heal a family and brought 4 hearts together as one? I do, Robert replied, looking at Victoria with eyes full of love and admiration. I take her as my partner in showing our daughters that love means showing up, paying attention, and choosing each other every single day. As they exchanged rings, Sarah stepped forward with the wedding gift she'd been working on for months, a painting showing their family's story. The first panel depicted a lonely little girl in a park. The second showed a man sharing his sandwich. The final panel showed all 4 of them together, laughing and whole. This is our family story, Sarah announced to the small gathering. It started when someone was kind when they didn't have to be. It grew because people chose to change and love better. And it proves that sometimes the most important things happen when we're not even trying to be important. After the ceremony, as the small reception continued around them, Victoria pulled Robert aside to the exact spot where they'd first spoken. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you just walked past her that first day? Victoria asked. Robert considered the question, looking at Sarah teaching Emma how to make flower crowns while their wedding photographer captured the moment. No, he said finally. I think we were meant to find each other. Maybe not in that exact way, but somehow. Sarah needed someone to see her. You needed someone to help you remember what matters most. Emma needed a sister, and I needed all of you to make my family complete. Victoria leaned against her husband, watching their daughters laugh together in the golden afternoon light. The Sterling Industries board still can't believe I actually take weekends off now. Scandalous, Robert teased, kissing the top of her head. You know what's really scandalous? Victoria said with a smile. I'm happier now, working less and being present more than I ever was when work was my whole life. Sarah was right that first day in the park. The best people are the ones who are kind when nobody's watching. As the sun began to set over Seattle, the Chen Sterling family gathered their things and headed home together. Sarah skipped between her parents, holding both their hands, while Emma chattered excitedly about their upcoming family vacation, their first real vacation where all phones would stay home and they'd focus entirely on each other. "Daddy," Emma said as they reached the car, "when I grow up, I want to be like you." "Like me, how?" Robert asked, curious. "I want to be the kind of person who shares their lunch with someone who's hungry, even if it's my last sandwich." Robert's heart swelled with pride as he realized the most important lesson had been learned. That kindness creates ripples that can transform entire families, that love grows when it's shared, and that sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the simplest question: "Would you give me a piece of your lunch?" Their story had started with a hungry child and a generous heart. It had grown into something beautiful, a testament to the power of showing up, paying attention, and choosing love over everything else. And it was just the beginning.